My name is Lindsay Sagnet, and I am Tony Marra's editor. I'm grateful for the chance to stand before you this morning in this magnificent company, and thank you for your tremendous support of Tony's debut novel, A Constellation of Vital Phenomena. Since Tony is here to tell you about his incredible new book, I'm here to tell you about Tony and hopefully make him blush a little bit. Constellation blew everyone away in 2013 and was integral to putting our new literary imprint, Hogarth, on the map. It was the year's most lauded debut novel, a New York Times bestseller in both hardcover and paperback, winner of the National Book Critics Circle inaugural John Leonard Prize, the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, the Barnes & Noble Discover Award, Indie's Choice Award, and a National Book Award longlist selection, and appeared on over more than 20 year-end lists, including library journals. Abroad, it has won the Berlin Prize in Germany, the Athens Prize in Greece, and another prize just announced that I can't quite mention yet. But I've never seen a debut embraced by every part of the reading community in the way this book was. Librarians, booksellers, readers, critics. And it's incredibly exciting to have a new book from him already, and so it feels very soon for us. I've never seen a writer connect their characters in the way that Tony does, in the way he did in Constellation. It's that same kind of feeling as here in Tsar of Love and Techno. Brilliantly constructed and beautifully inhabited, Tsar is a collection of interconnected stories set in Russia that form what I'm calling sort of a call and response to the Chechnya set Constellation. Tsar is infused with the same life force that animated Constellation. Tony is a writer driven by a deep and authentic curiosity. It was that curiosity that led him to Chechnya, a conflict so far away from his own life and from ours. But it was his genius that brought him back to us with stories moving and rich, stories peopled with characters that felt so close you could simply reach out and take the apple out of their hand. They sit and talk in kitchens that feel like our kitchens. They struggle to protect their families as we struggle to do the same. They strive and strike out and have hopes and dreams that mirror our own. Tony is a deeply beautiful writer, line by line, but it is always his humanism that floors me. His valiant effort to understand humanity and animate it leaves us on the receiving end of transcendent, universal, and profound books that are driven always, always by their characters. Characters who look back at us and say, I am here, I am you. He's one for the ages, so without further ado, here's Tony Marra.
I'm really, really honored. That was beautiful, thank you. Paula and Garth just gave two of the best book talks that I've heard in a long time, and I spilled coffee all over my notes. So we'll see how this goes. Thank you to Library Journal and Random House for hosting us. Thank you all for coming out. I'm very proud to be here. I'm proud to be awake. I was talking on the phone with my dad the other night, and he told me to tell those librarians in New York that under his watch I had never had an overdue library book. And this is a particular point of pride for him because he grew up in Brooklyn, and his very first job was working for the New York Public Library. This was in the mid-'50s. He was still in high school, and he would go around the waterfront tracking down overdue library books. I'm not sure if anybody saw the Seinfeld with Lieutenant Bookman. He was sort of the Cub Scout version, I suppose, of that. And so growing up, I was terrified of having an overdue library book. I was convinced that this, these wonderful librarians at my library sort of contracted Dog the Bounty Hunter to track down any delinquent borrowers. And I bring my dad up because more than anyone, he taught me the importance of a librarian's recommendation. Largely by demonstrating what can go horribly, horribly wrong when you don't ask a librarian for help. When I was in 5th grade, the time had come for my dad to give me the talk about the facts of life. And this is, of course, a terribly awkward conversation for any father and son, particularly in an Italian Catholic family where every conception is immaculate and every birth is virgin. And so thank goodness for libraries, right? On any given day, you can probably go to a library in America and see a befuddled and confused and uncomfortable father wandering the stacks looking for something so that he won't have to actually say explain these things to his son. And my dad was one of them. And had he asked a librarian for help, he no doubt would have been guided to something biologically accurate and age appropriate. But instead, he went it alone, which is how the birds and the bees were explained to me through a novel with Fabio in a kilt, embracing a duchess who seemed to spill from her corset like a large souffle in a small pan. And it was called something like The Brazen Scot Seduced Me. And it was set in the medieval Scottish Highlands. And it gets much worse because he got this as a book on tape. And I grew up in Washington, D.C., and he stopped at the library right before driving me to summer camp in Vermont. And it was a 12-hour drive, and it was a 16-hour book on tape. And so within the first 5 minutes, we knew that something was terribly wrong, and it got very quiet, and we didn't talk for years. And the story of The Brazen Scot Seduced Me unfolded, across those 12 hours, and neither of us said anything because we have this relationship where so long as neither of us acknowledged what it was that we were listening to, there was the possibility that we might emerge with our pride and dignity intact, which didn't happen at all. And I have to say that listening to 12 hours of kilt-themed erotica with your father is educational. Turgid became a regular part of my vocabulary. I sort of have this entire list of romance novel cliches, swords being sheathed that I could go into, but it's probably too early in the morning for that. But I bring this up. Because you might think that from the title of this collection that this is a historical romance, the Tsar of Love and Techno. But it's not. It is a short story collection set in Russia that spans the 20th and 21st centuries. And it begins in the 1930s when a failed portrait artist is tasked by Soviet censors to begin erasing the faces of the politically disgraced, beginning with his own brother. This was something that happened with some regularity in Stalin's Russia. The faces of his political enemies would be erased, and this was actually one of the first widespread uses of sort of the most contemporary tool of photographic manipulation, the airbrush. And who better to erase faces than a portrait artist? One day, this portrait artist receives an antique painting of a dacha set inside a box of images meant to be censored, and the mystery behind its appearance and what it leads him to do reverberates throughout the remaining decades and throughout the remaining stories in the collection. And like Constellation, the book sort of slowly threads together a wide cast of characters who are connected by this painting, which is an ordinary dacha in this pastoral landscape. There's a conservator who restores this painting in the 1990s and discovers the insertion of a single boy inside of all of the works that this portrait artist had censored. There's a curator of art in a Chechen art museum who goes to great lengths to save this painting from the conflict there, because the dacha in it is the last place he ever saw his wife. There is a retired gangster, the nephew of this portrait artist, who is haunted by the role that he played in his uncle's arrest, as well as by the fact that his own father was one of these enemies and he's never seen his father's face. There's a granddaughter of a famous ballerina who buys this painting after her boyfriend disappears while crossing the landscape. And a young man who is held hostage in the well beside this dacha. It's a short story collection, but I hope that it has the sort of expansiveness and cohesiveness of a novel. I love those kind of in-between books Let the Great World Spin or A Visit from the Goon Squad, that sort of straddle that line between a collection and a novel. I feel like we don't really have a good word for that in English. There's novel and stories, but all novels are in stories. There's linked stories, which just sort of sounds like a bad dating website, and whatever you want to call it. I feel like there must be a really great German compound word that has it, but I'm not sure what it is. Whatever it is, it's an intergenerational mystery. It's about the power of art to both transcend and to corrupt us. It's set in Russia, but it's really set in those borderlands between a family history and a national history. The first time I spoke about Constellation was at ALA in Seattle in 2013. And the librarians I got to meet there were just unbelievably kind and generous. I almost sort of feel like that experience was the origin story of anything good that happened with that particular novel. I feel like my life would be much smaller and much dimmer if not for the books that librarians have recommended over the years. Harold and the Purple Crayon and Maniac McGee and the Redwall series. The first time I ever read Hemingway was because a librarian put it in my hands. And all of those books came from the same library as The Brazen Scot Seduced Me. and actually, so just to backtrack on that a little bit. So we arrived at summer camp after 12 hours of listening to this, and we still hadn't finished the book on tape. And my dad patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good talk, son. We'll pick it back up on the way home." Just to close, if Constellation has been worthy of any of your recommendations to any of your patrons, you have all of my gratitude, and I hope that the Tsar of Love and Techno might be as well. Thank you very much.